Here's the virtual table for July. First one's submitted by Elizabeth Hargrave. I think this was found on one of the forays this weekend. So you're saying, okay, wait, you guys told me that these cicadas have eraser butts. Okay, well, this is actually a different fungus. This is a metarrhizum species. You can find this on moths and all kinds of other things. There's lots of different species. I didn't put any kind of species epitaph on it. But anyway, this is just another one of those entomopathogenic fungi. It's kind of like the cordyceps and things like that. You can even see them on like little centipedes and all kinds of stuff. So I thought that was kind of cool. A couple more that they found on the foray, I'm guessing. This one kind of looks like a little blah brown polypore. So if they would have had a photo of the underside, it's just regular pores under there. But it has a really cool feature in that if you give it a whiff, it actually smells like cinnamon. So this is Metuloidea fragrans. I always like finding that. It's always good to kind of give your mushrooms a whiff. You never know what you're gonna see. The other one over here on the right is one of the gastromycetes. These are in the same group of, say, like puffballs. So they have like a little gleba, that's where the spores are produced. And so this is actually a stinkhorn. And so instead of that gleba being inside and drying up and then puffing out with raindrops, it leaves the gleba on the tip here, and it really stinks and causes the flies to fly over, and it sticks on their feet and they fly off. You find these usually in like wood chips. You can find them in the wood sometimes, but a lot of times these are in wood chips and such. That is Pseudocolus fusiformis, stinky squid. All right, Douglas Miller found this one at Patuxent Research Center. It's kind of hard to see. A little mushroom there, looks like he turned one over right there. And when you look a little closer, you say, okay, well, that looks kind of like some stuff I was finding when the morels were out. And it is, it's very similar. You've got, this one actually is a little different. The ones, when the morels are coming out, are usually growing on the wood directly. And these look to be a bit more terrestrial. The cap is a bit lighter. They're usually dark brown for the cervinus. But if you notice here, it also has the free gills. And as the gills mature, you're going to start seeing that pink coloration happen. A lot of times we'll tell you if it's a terrestrial mushroom growing kind of like this, but this one has free gills with the pink spores. Entelomas don't have free gills. So this is actually a Pluteus as well. This is Pluteus petastatus. It is growing from wood. A lot of times it's wood debris and just rotting wood under the ground. So it kind of looks like it's terrestrial, but it's really not. All right, this one's submitted by Branislav Georgievic. This is, I think you guys can probably tell what that one looks like. I think a lot of you have had some experience with this mushroom. And so he collected some. You can see it's got this orangish top, yellowish edge. The pore surface would be yellow as well. And he decided to cook some up. This is Latiparus sulphureus, chicken of the woods. One thing I will say is if you haven't had chicken in the woods before, make sure you eat a small amount. It does affect some people, not very well, and might get a little upset stomach. You also want to make sure you cook it well. This is one of the easier mushrooms in my estimation to learn to identify. Not too much looks like it with this coloration and, has pores, not gills and things of that nature. But once you get a little bit of experience, this one isn't too tough to identify. All right, so this one was submitted by Felix Mitchell. We've seen something like this quite a few times over the months. You've got your brownish cap. A lot of times this one is a little whiter than this. This is actually a Pleurotus pulmonarius, the summer oyster. So you say, well, why is this pulmonarius and not ostriatus? Well, ostriatus tends to be a little hardier, a little, a little thicker flesh, a little bit larger. It typically has a browner cap, and it tends to fruit closer to the fall. This is more a summer mushroom, a little smaller. There is another one that's similar, Pleurotus populinus, but then you'd have to know like what it was growing on, say like aspen or cottonwood or something like that, and then you could put that species on it. But anyway, that's your summer oyster. So Felix also found a couple of jelly mushrooms. So they look very similar aside from the color. The one on the left is Phaeotremella frondosa, I believe. This would eventually get a bit of a darker brown color. The frondosa is kind of like the leafy nature of the lobes and how it grows. Apparently this is also associated with the sterium. It looks like there might be a little Trametes growing right there. I don't think that's the sterium right there, but there should be some sort of sterium growing on here, and so they believe that it's parasitizing the hyphae of the sterium in the wood. I believe that they believe that it's the same case for this other mushroom. This is actually your typical witch's butter, Tremella mesenterica. This one's quite common. You see it often. It's growing on hardwood twigs and things like that. There's also another one that grows on conifer that looks very similar, but you can tell the difference by what it's growing on. All right, so this is submitted by Marilyn Dean Mendel. This is always an exciting find. You're like, okay, what do we got here? I don't know if you guys are experienced enough to say, okay, that looks like a bolete, but this is a typical red bolete look. And when you flip it over, you'll see it has these pores. She's either dragged a knife or her fingernail over it to see if there's any kind of staining reaction. You can see that this red coloration goes pretty much all the way up to the apex of the stipe. And this is also a good thing to do, is break or cut the cap. And that way you can see the staining reaction that happens in the flesh. And so this looks like this is an actual used to be Boletus, Beirangia bicolor. So I think that this might be an actual bicolor. The red goes all the way up to the apex. It looks like the staining reaction was not super dark and probably was kind of slow and happened a little bit in the flesh. Sometimes you can kind of get a whiff, and that might help. The pore surface is fairly thin. A lot of boletes will have a very thick pore layer. And there are a few lookalikes that can possibly upset your stomach as well. But a lot of times those don't have like this reddish coloration all the way up to the apex like that. Some say that, like, say, sensibilis smells a bit like curry, but then I think some can smell similar. Sensibilis, that's saying it's sensitive, so its staining reaction is quick, and so it's fast and dark, and so that's kind of one way you might be able to key it in your head, like, okay, well, that reaction was good. It's sensitive when you touch it. Then they have pseudosensibilis. There's quite a few different in this group. Sometimes the smells can help, but anyway, this is a very tasty mushroom. But just make sure you know what you're getting. Anyway, so Marilyn also submitted this one. I always like these little guys. One year, quite a few years ago, I didn't know what this was, and I think I was the Foray Chair then as well, and it was on almost every, actually it was every foray, like in the summer into fall, all over the place. Not just like, oh, here it is. It was everywhere. I don't know what happened. It was like a massed year for these. So this is Galliella rufa, the hairy rubber cup. And I've heard some people say that this should be called like the peanut butter cup or something, and I like that. But yeah, after that year, like I didn't know it that year. And because we encountered it so much, now I actually, you know, it stuck. It stuck quick after that year. All right. Is that also, I'm sorry, was that also Maryland? I can't see with the thing. Maryland, I think Maryland submitted this one as well. This is kind of an interesting one, especially considering the name. But this is a Cortinarius. It's a little bit earlier than some other Cortinarius come out. The Cortinarius tend to have rusty colored spores. And so you can see this actually has blood red gills. And as the spores start maturing, you're going to get this rusty coloration. A lot of times you'll see it deposited on the cortina. She didn't get a shot of the cortina, but they tend to have these bell-shaped caps, kind of silky, would be hygrophonous if it was damp. But this is actually Cortinarius marylandensis. So it's kind of like the Maryland cort. And we found this one in forays in the past. And it can look very similar to some other Cortinarius that have these similar red coloration. But this bell-shaped cap like this can help you to distinguish it. All right, Jeremy George submitted this one. This is a pretty common mushroom that that you might find growing from a stump or something along those lines. This is a Xylaria polymorpha. Sometimes they'll have different species which are longer and skinnier. He said he broke this one and it was pure white inside. If you find this one and you cut it, sometimes you can kind of get a cross section of those parathecia. This is an ascomycete where the little spores are produced, and it's kind of neat to see these little vase shapes in the flesh of the surface. Carrie Raditz submitted this one. He's a friend of his from Rhode Island, sent it to him, and was like, what the heck's going on here? So what's actually happening is this is a bolete, and this is being eaten by a mushroom mold. And so you can see in this cut one, it's got this kind of golden color developing right here. And actually this is the spores beginning to mature in here, and it's probably going to grow through that surface of that white hypomyces. So this is actually Hypomyces chrysospermus, the bolete mold. This is fairly common, good conditions, and you're going to get these on a lot of your boletes. And thanks for the submission. Marilyn had sent this little collage, so I used it at the end. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Mitch. That was another stellar presentation, as always.